bank branches across the country, we know they all face unique challenges when it comes to really standing out. And a lot of this stems from the fact that most of them operate within, well, actually they all operate within a tightly regulated environment. Both federal and state compliance requirements create rather level playing field that limits how much banks truly can differentiate themselves operationally. Add to that a uniform set of products, DDAs, loans, credit card, and it's no surprise that a lot of branches do start to look and feel the same. Now, even today, we've already heard from so many commentators that reflect that branch design and customer service has really converged around industry best practices. And although today we all recognize the importance of the branch for physical connection to brands and our clients, the role of the branch continues to evolve and shift in the eyes of many of our consumers. So, no, but our conversation today isn't about what's holding us back. Our conversation today is going to be what's possible. Now, despite these constraints, there are bold ideas, creative strategies, and evolving consumer needs that will really help to redefine the role of the bank branch over the course of the next 15 years. Now, I'm excited to hear today from our panelists who are going to share insights from how their work in branches continues to transform to meet the future and how we can continue to create powerful differentiators for these future spaces. So good afternoon, after lunch. I am Ray Ehscheid, and I am leading the retail practice for Nelson worldwide. So at Nelson and on my team, I do have an exciting opportunity to partner with financial services firms across a wide range of sectors, as well as I lead our traditional retail, food service, and hospitality environmental teams, bringing brand strategies to life within physical space. Now, we thrive on cross-industry collaborations, all with one key goal in mind, and that's to create standout branded experiences that truly connect customers and that drive impact. Many of you may also know that a big part of my career was spent designing retail and workspace environments for one of the largest banks in the US. So these conversations that we're having today truly strike a chord and are actually very close to my heart. Today, I am joined by Mr. Matt Bosserman, VP of Retail Design and Visual Merchandising at Capital One, and also Vikas, I got your first name wrong this time. Vikas Srivastava. Srivastava.
Yeah.
Vikas, VP and Design Lead at Fifth Third Bank. Matt, would you care to talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Ray. You practiced that so many times. It's seamless. Also, bold move on having us speak after lunch. I hope
there you go.
Yeah, keep you all wide awake. Thank you, Ray. I'm Matt Bosserman with Capital One. I lead our retail experiences team, and that means two things for us at Capital One. One half of our team is responsible for the design and the supporting of the construction of all of our physical space channels, which for us means our cafe channel, our traditional bank branch channel, as well as some support around airport lounges. And then the other half of my team, which we affectionately call visual merchandising, which in the financial services industry doesn't mean a whole lot, but in the traditional retail world means a tremendous amount, historically anyway. And that team is responsible for product marketing and storytelling inside of our cafes.
And Vikas?
Yeah, my name is Vikas Srivastava. I'm with Fifth Third Bank. I lead our retail design program, and what that entails is also similar to what Matt is, renovations, ground ups, site planning, everything that goes into the branch, even starting to shape what our customer experience is within our four walls. But everything from signage, site plans, everything. So
a broad range. Absolutely. So we actually are going to talk a little bit about what we look at when we think about this new movement. So, Vikas, why don't we start with you? Let's talk for a second. So when you look out at the environments today, both yours and across the industry, what's one thing that you think branches are doing exceptionally well today?
I want to say one is providing, and when I think about this question, I'm thinking about it like, okay, we're talking about US here.
Right.
When you think about it internationally, it sort of flips. So what we're doing really well is just providing some sort of sense of security for people, that their money is within 15 minutes of their house or whatever that connection may be. Whereas when you think about it in like Europe and in Asia, they're sort of shuttering branches and closing them. We're actively opening them, and I think that there's like some sort of psychological reason for us to be able to do that. And I think it's really just sense of security. It's providing access to money, and obviously because we provide access to money, we make communities thrive. So like when a bank goes into a new community, it uplifts that community, and there's a lot of resources and money that we can put in different directions to kind of make that community thrive. So I think the role of the branch is, one, security. It provides an uplift, and then also just access to money and access to being able to move funds from here to there. So,
well, you said something interesting. I want to pick up on that. So we talk about domestic U.S. branches. We talk about international branches.
Sure.
So I think over the course of the last several years, we've looked at international branches as being a real interesting bellwether of new and innovative ideas, again, thinking outside of our own restrictions. So maybe talk about some of the things that you have seen internationally that could be interesting.
well, and here's kind of the thing is, like, when I'm looking for these things, I'm finding stuff that's not done recently. I would say that it's been done 2015, 16, 17. I'm thinking about like ING Direct in Turkey, in Istanbul. And also Virgin Money, like those types of like unique experiences that we're really trying to push the envelope of like where they wanted banking to be going, but I guess I don't know where, like, how did that end up, or how successful were those programs?
Yeah. I think a lot of them have engaged and disappeared.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think one you brought up really interesting, and maybe this actually goes to Matt. So I can recall several years ago the ING Cafe in New York City, where it was the only place you could go, and there was a Series 6 licensed broker behind the teller counter, behind the barista bar, who was not only pulling a latte for you, but giving you financial advice.
Right.
And as much as I love that idea and a good latte, and by the way, it was the only place you get Pete's Coffee in New York City at that particular point. ING got purchased by you, right?
That's right.
So talk about how that evolution happened.
Well, first of all, I should say our baristas are no longer providing financial advice. But we have an incredibly talented expert staff of ambassadors who are.
Latte art, it's really
So
good.
we are no longer serving Pete's Coffee, much to some people's chagrin. However, Verve is an amazing coffee brand. For those of you who haven't tried it, come find me. So it's
Feeling like I should then say, here's Verve coffee. There you go.
I was thinking about the evolution of the cafe as one of our channels. And it's evolved quite a lot in the last 10 years since the early days of the concept. One of the things I think is most interesting in terms of its evolution is the way in which we've really begun to incorporate the totality of what we stand for as a brand in the space. Meaning, we are, unlike many traditional financial services institutions, a brand that represents a wide variety of product offering, inclusive of traditional financial services products. And so leveraging the space as a way of storytelling around the products that we offer, and really beginning to sort of thread or create this continuous thread of all the ways in which we as a brand can elevate your lifestyle is something that we're doing much more in a way than we were doing originally.
No, I think that's really intriguing because, again, we think about Capital One and the cafe environment, and I think that's one of the exemplars that gets brought up quite frequently when people talk about the shift in what banking represents. And I do want to get back to that, but we think about the growth in the cafe environments and how Capital One still has, however, a traditional branch network,
Right.
Much like Fifth Third. And just seeing what's on the screen right now, I think about the shift that you're experiencing within Fifth Third, and also trying to address your clients and consumers in an innovative and different way.
Sure.
So maybe let's touch on that for a minute. When you think about the growth of Fifth Third, what's your biggest challenge within your environment?
I mean, I think like everybody has sort of said it, it's people. Like you can create this cool thing, and then you want it to operate in a certain way, and it sort of degrades over time and how it gets implemented and executed. So that's part of it. I think obviously rising costs for a lot of building and just the construction cost for new builds is a little bit high these days. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we're always trying to push the envelope in terms of how do we rethink the banking experience, knowing that transactions are declining, knowing that people are coming in for advice and guidance more than they are, and knowing that the younger generation really wants to be informed about stuff and sort of learn hands-on. So we're really trying to transform some of those environments. We want people to come into our banks and say, like, this doesn't feel like a bank, or doesn't feel like this is someplace. But we also need them to understand that we are a bank, and we do provide those financial services and advice. So we need people to rely on our teams to be able to execute on that.
So thinking again about what we just saw, and you talked about people and that connection to community would be the logical piece. So talk about for a second, when we think about Capital One Cafe, what's that community? What are we doing? Or what are you doing? What are we doing? What are you doing when Capital One thinks about that connection to community? Is that an important part of this reinvention?
I would say it's fundamental. If you think about kind of the pillars on which the experience of our cafe is built, community is a critical part of it. I also think that the idea around how to engage with your local community in a way that's really authentic is really challenging. But one of the things that is critical to its success is starting several steps behind the intent to engage with the community. It's starting with like a real estate strategy. Where do you want to be in the community? What is the right location in which to really embed yourself in the community? What is the right location in which to create a welcoming space for nonprofit organizations that is accessible to them and feels like they are part of your experience, and vice versa. If you don't start there and you start with a space that is hard to get to for a nonprofit organization, isn't accessible to their board of directors, for example, to host a meeting or something like that, you're starting from the wrong end of the stick, I think.
So from a operational perspective, when you think about the utilization of those types of spaces for community involvement, does Capital One in your program also then have an aggressive outreach program to actually connect with those communities so that it's outbound as well as providing space inbound?
Absolutely. In fact, I'll give you an example, which is on last Thursday evening, we held a grand opening event for a location in the Bronx that has just recently opened. And we had, I think, 5 nonprofit organizations from that local community, many of whom were born and raised in that community, and many of our ambassador team was born and raised in that community. And so the outreach opportunities become organic because you're starting with a staff who already knows the community, is part of the community, and has those natural connections already.
So when we think about Fifth Third's engagement with community as well, I'm thinking about, we talked a little bit before about building trust with community and continuing to grow, especially with the younger generation that may not trust banking institutions the same way we of a slightly more mature organization would. Talk about maybe a little bit about how you utilize space in the same way. Do the new branches also engage the community in this sort of one-on-one dialogue?
Yeah, I mean, so it sort of comes down to, for Fifth Third, it's like, are we going into a brand new location? Is it a ground up prototype? Is it a renovation? You're seeing some renovations on the screen where you're seeing full murals on buildings, and that's really a community activation thing. So like we're going into these neighborhoods, we're putting a branch there, but we're also activating connecting with the local artists and the local muralists and the local schools to develop these murals that are going on these buildings. So now that one that you're seeing that's in West End, Charlotte, it's right across from the school that the students got to work on it like as a real world project, and then and work with the muralist. They develop the mural. It ends up on the building right across from their school, and now they've got a piece that they can take on and kind of call their own and as a portfolio piece, if they want to become an artist or something like that. So we're trying to do that. We're obviously trying to do things like United Way and sort of the fundraising things, but we're also engaging the local chambers. And when we do our branch openings, we are inviting everybody to those and doing big ribbon cutting ceremonies, making sure that everybody in the community knows that we're there. And if we've got space for them, we're making sure that our branch managers are communicating that, because a lot of times we'll put a conference room in, and if it doesn't get utilized, it sits there empty, and I'm sure everybody has them. But you want to try to get those people that don't have the space of their own to be able to go in those spaces. So,
and that's where I think that engagement with community becomes so important, whether it is outbound or how we react with it inbound. But I want to pick up on something that you said. I want to take it maybe a little bit back to this idea of the brand and how the brand itself evolves and shifts and changes. Like you talked about new markets, or you talked about West Charlotte. So something new that's in the community. But let's talk about the brand. And what does the brand actually then start to represent, both in the bank of today, and then what do we start seeing 5 to 10 to 15 years out?
Sure. I think right now, obviously, we're trying to everybody's trying to communicate a tone of voice, and it usually starts with some marketing materials, and then you're like, all right, well, how do I translate that? Or it's a branch build that sort of influences something else, and vice versa. When I think about 5 years out, I think about a little bit like more sustainability, and
Mm,
some steps towards sustainability. You know, we're looking into solar and EV charging and things like that. As we get into like 10 years out, you know, maybe we start to build the brand as a lifestyle, or you know, when we see retail brands like Mercedes and Porsche, and they've got their test tracks, but then they also have their hotels, and they start to build on that. And I think that we've talked about American Express as
right.
that sort of key financial institution that really is a lifestyle, and it's not about the money. It's about having the card. It's about being a part of
Right.
that community.
And I think that's an incredibly powerful thing. I mean, let's maybe touch on that for a second. I mean, American Express, as an incredibly large financial brand, has really no physical network,
Hmm.
but yet it actually is a powerful tool that people recognize within the financial services world. The card that you might carry, but then also the additional services they offer, and they tie into their client in a very particular way. It's aspirational. It's driven. So Capital One, I don't think it's any secret, they're starting to create a lounge network. So talk about that. Share with us maybe what you can in a certain perspective of like how does that create brand building that really resonates back to the branches or the cafes?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that we offer this portfolio of products that many other competitors offer, sort of equivalently scaled, and many don't.
Mhm.
And for us, that is a kind of a critical piece to our success, is that we're creating a brand that ties into every aspect of your lifestyle. Um,
Mhm.
and so when we think about the lounge as one of the many channels in which our customers will interact with us, one of the places we start is what is our brand voice, as Vikas was talking about, and ensuring that we create a consistency of that throughout any place that our customers are interacting with us. It will look and feel different. You walk into a cafe and you walk into a lounge, they definitively feel different,
Mhm.
but they also feel like they have come from the same playbook. And I think it's a
Mhm.
delicate thing to do, but I think it's important for the more discerning customer, I think our customers are all becoming more discerning over time. They can smell out inauthenticity for sure. They can smell out saying one thing and doing another,
Sure.
or sort of posturing in a community service, giving back away in a way that isn't genuine.
Mm.
So I'm diverging a bit here, but I think the
No.
point I'm trying to make is that we have to start with being really true to what we stand for as a brand, and what our customers care about, really understanding that and not assuming we know what that is, and then building from there.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'd almost think of that as, maybe it's a plug here for marketing in a
Mhm.
sense, right? When we think about the marketing spend, we think about what marketing represents both inside the branch and outside the branch from those brand building experiences. I mean, I don't think Porsche decided to build a hotel just because they thought they would make a lot of money on it.
Sure.
They did it to really enhance what their brand represents.
Absolutely.
We talked a few moments ago that the number one most recognized brand in the world is Rolex, a highly aspirational product that most people will never own, either by intention or because there's not that many of them relatively produced, or because of the scale of the cost, or because of what it represents. But it is a powerful resonator. So, could a financial brand actually exist in that territory? And we actually know the answer is yes. I mean, our aforementioned American Express sits up there on the top 5 most recognized brands in the world. Um, but let's maybe bring it back and let's talk maybe more about what those brand extensions or that brands, what does that brand represent? When we think about again how we each carry now our financial institution in our phones. So in that particular era, what are we seeing customers and clients doing? We'll start, Matt, in a sense, I think within the cafe space because I'd be kind of curious, are there even clients and customers customers at that point that come in that may not even know they're in a bank branded cafe?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There are many customers who walk through the door or up to the threshold and ask, "Can I come in?" So that continues to be an opportunity for us to really educate and inform customers and prospects alike on what this space is. But I think more broadly, or maybe more directly to your question, what is the purpose, I suppose, or maybe what will the purpose be of our physical spaces as we look forward back to the 5, 10, 15-year conversation. And I think a lot about it all the time. I think about how are the ways in which the things that have been with us already for decades are going to continue to inform the future experience. Technology is sort of like table stakes, right? Like, of course we have to have apps. Of course we have to have a seamless digital experience. So when you are coming into a physical location, more often than not, it's because you have a servicing issue, right? And so you're often coming in with a state of mind that is likely not a promoter of the brand, right? And so how do we, number one, I think, accept and then build around the idea that the fundamental purpose of the physical space is changing, right? If it's primarily around problem solving, how do we start there and then build upon that and create additional extensions of experiences, assuming that many of our customers will be walking in the door specifically to solve a problem? How do we allow them to walk away promoting our brand again? And I think there are lots of different ways in which we can do that. For us, it has to do with things like leveraging coffee service to create an environment that allows us to then build relationships and then talk about the next and the next and the next level of depth of conversation around how to build loyalty around the brand and tell the story of the brand. I'm really intrigued by this idea that I see coffee shops popping up all over the place lately in the traditional retail space.
Yes.
I think there's a place for it, and I think there are certain brands who they know exactly what they're doing. I think there are other brands that are trying it, but don't have a real clear vision on why they're doing it. And so my challenge to myself, and I guess all of us, is that makes sense for us as a brand in some spaces. I don't think it makes sense for everybody. But what's the equivalency of a coffee shop that is appropriate for the customer where are you meeting them, and what is meaningful to them, and what is going to elevate their experience with you as a brand, and ultimately drive loyalty, of course, which is ultimately one of our many goals.
That's interesting. Well, because when we were starting to think about our new branch and what we were going to do next, we wanted to have some sort of offering for somebody. You want to come in and be hospitable, but we're not a coffee shop, right? So we're not going to try to bring in a coffee shop. So we're trying to figure out solutions for those types of things without having to do it. The other thing that we're also looking at is like there's like 20% of people in a certain age group have anxiety for being in public spaces and sort of loud noises and things like that. And when you look at what other retailers and just where people come to gather, they a lot of times they have like days where they dim the lights or they turn the music down. And so I'm thinking about like, how does the bank react to stuff like that, and how do we cater to certain clientele that we haven't typically focused on in the past?
I think that's actually really important. When we think about design in general, there is a whole focus on design for neurodiversity. We see that a lot more on the workplace side, but you're absolutely right. We're starting to see that really tip into retailers who are adept and who are trying to think about how we work with these types of consumers. So it makes perfect sense that a bank branch, how do you think about that?
Well, especially like if you're coming into a bank and you're already stressed, right?
Exactly.
Like you already start off up here. Like then you're going to go in and hear the music and you're going to hear everything. Then like how do you recover from that, or how do you make it so it's widely acceptable or universally designed in a way that everybody that comes in feels comfortable?
Well, you've almost got to get that client back to level one before you can move on and gain trust and move forward. But I can absolutely see where the importance of that comes in. I think, Matt, you brought up a really interesting point too, because even in the traditional retail world, like you said, it's almost table stakes, it seems now, to have a cafe environment or something along those lines. But I think what's intriguing, and I will bring a funny sidebar to the equation, because when we think about coffee specifically, I share with these guys that in my past life, I remember one of the key research and the customer feedback loops that we got were that our branches, absolutely, people remember to smell burnt coffee. And so how do you get beyond? How do you do it in an intentional, what's the right word, a ceremonial way? In so many retail environments, the one that comes to my mind immediately is Tiffany in New York, the new landmark where every step that you take is almost choreographed. And it was done by an incredible agency who really thought about what is that first greet, what is that time when you're offered a drink, what are you offered, and then how does that sequence unfold to the final place where you're presented with your blue bag and your perfectly wrapped box. And then you share that experience just like I'm doing with a number of other people. So thinking about what those ceremonies can represent, perhaps that also gets us thinking about the consumer specifically and how we segment them, and then how do we address them and create unique experiences so that we may not be making an espresso for everyone, but there could be a reason why we would want to make that espresso to alleviate that experience, especially when that customer is a little stressed because they want to come in and have that particular, not necessarily confrontation, but how do you diffuse the scenario? So let's go back again, because I think there's so many great ideas that we're thinking about. But what would be perhaps maybe a surprising or unconventional idea that you would want to start introducing in a future branch, or that you've seen out there that could be introduced?
I mean, I think the Virgin Money Lounge is very unconventional and unique, and there's a lot of aspects to that I like, but I don't know how functional it is. So I'm always balancing like, okay, this is a cool idea, but is it functional, and are people going to use it?
Right.
When I think about things that like are going to sustain, I'm thinking about like, biophilia. Is there a place where I can create an area where people can go and have an experience, and it's an outdoor experience, but it's in our branch, or some way to kind of communicate that there's some life in this space.
Well, and maybe sustainability is an interesting piece to think about, because we think about branch renovation, and certainly in retail environments, it unfortunately, both retail and workplace are some of the largest landfill sort of problems, because it's oftentimes the idea is let's rip everything out and create a brand new experience, but then ultimately, what's the payback for that? So when you think about the legacy network that's out there, shifts and changes, what's your thought process around sustainability versus reinvention?
Well, I think it starts largely with one of the points you touched on, which was, or maybe you were alluding to, which is what level of investment and what level of intervention is meaningful to the customer, right? Like, I think we often tell ourselves that changing from green to red makes a huge difference to the customer, because it cues something new and different, sure. But I think there are lighter touch ways in which to do that. And so I like to start by looking through the lens of, well, what's the most thing that's going to impact the customer's experience the most? Also, equally importantly, what's going to impact our frontline team's experience the most? And how do we do that in a way that has the biggest impact? It often doesn't mean you have to demolish 3/4 of the physical space and start from scratch. And in fact, I think often when you do that, it often looks like a bit of a patchwork quilt experience anyway. So I sort of start with this premise of like, where we talk about where are we going next as a servicing model. And I think if we're saying that, and I'm saying, or at least I believe that problem solving and servicing is going to be like the reason for entry. How do we transform that to a really positive experience? And I think about things like, how do we educate our customers around the offering of products that we offer, whatever that is for our particular institution? How do we excite them around ways in which the way in which we can engage with their lifestyle is something that's compelling to them and informs them in a way that they didn't know walking in the door? And then I think also, how do we inspire them around the ways in which we're meaningfully contributing to their local community, not giving dollars to fill in the blank charitable organization. And I think if we can incorporate those three experiences in the space, you can do that in really light touch ways. You don't have to tear the whole thing apart. That's sort of, I think I start with what's the end goal in mind.
No, I think that, again, bringing back your focus from an earlier piece of the conversation about like what's really important then to the customer, and ultimately what's important to that next generation. I mean, we touched base a little while ago on Generation Z or Generation Alpha, and then what's going to be important to them when they think about these types of environments. So how does that factor into your thought process when we think about renovation or reinvention?
So we renovate a lot, we consolidate a lot, we do all of those things. And when we do renovations, the hard part is we've got this prototype that we're building ground ups from, right? And we're trying to take parts and pieces for that and implement it into renovations. How do you let somebody know that something happened on the inside without doing something on the outside, right? So now we're looking at the entire building and saying, okay, do we need to paint it? Do we need to update our signage? Do we need to, and like those types of things inherently need to be done after a certain period of time. And
Agreed.
but it's really like, how do you communicate the change? And for somebody who's been going to the traditional branches since they were a kid, and it's still the same, and then you renovate the inside, like, how do you let their kids know that something changed here, or something is different here, or has been updated or modernized, or whatever we want to call it?
It's a tough message.
Sure.
It's an expensive message, can be. But again, I think ultimately the worth that you're talking about is where it comes in. It's like, what have we done to tie that consumer more tightly to our brand? So I think we've got about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
I think you can probably tell three of us have been talking about this for a little while. But the thing that is interesting to me as well, and always was a great internal dialogue in my past life and continues to be in my current life, is the aspect of the digital. When we think about digital interventions in branch, we think about external digital, et cetera. Where do you see the importance, again, when we think about interactivity with our clients? There's always been the dialogue that people like to come in and touch things in a branch. They just may not necessarily, they like to touch things in stores, but they may not want to touch things in a branch. What's your take on the look of digital within the experiences? Is that part of your renovation strategy?
Yes, digital is it's kind of table stakes for us. We have to have digital along with the physical, but we don't necessarily believe that when you enter the physical environment that we need to push you back onto a digital platform. So you've either come in because you're having troubles with this, or you can't do this, you've called somebody and it's not happening, now you're in the branch.
Right.
Well, we're not going to go be like, oh, well, let's get back on that computer and like go do your thing.
Right.
We're gonna try to solve that in person and with a person, and so that way you know that it's getting done, or you know that somebody's actually addressing your concern.
Exactly. Well, it's funny, that brought to my mind something I always thought was really intriguing that Barclays in Britain had done, where they had digital ambassadors. They had people who would actually take you and show you, usually older individuals or less digitally enabled individuals, how to utilize the tools successfully. So I thought it was a great combination of both analog and digital within the space.
You can get the little robot to drive it right around, and
there you
ever
go.
Seen that? I've seen that at a couple of financial institutions that ends up sitting in a corner for after a few months.
Right. I was going to say we're at NRF, right? Where you see the little digital robots bouncing around, and what do they do next? It's kind of frightened me too. It's kind of like clowns.
Sure.
They still frighten me to this day. That's a discussion.
Let's talk about that later.
Much later, exactly. Much later. So, but from the Capital One experience, let's talk about how that, again, the digital experience interacts there as well. I mean, I know we think about these types of tools, but also I would posit that in most Capital One Cafe environments, like massive digital screens, digital spectaculars really aren't the norm. It's something unusual, which is a very large expense. But talk to me about, like, how do customers, or what do you think about what that expense represents within your network?
Sure. Well, I mean, the term digital is so broad, right? We could talk about it in a variety of ways. I think I love what Vikas was touching on, and I think there's a through line here across our shared experiences, which is, and certainly I see digital as a tool. If you think about the customer servicing piece of the experience, I think the most important thing is that it feels as seamless as possible to the customer.
Integrated.
It doesn't particularly matter how clunky it feels, respectfully, to the frontline staff. I think as long as the customer walks away feeling like that was a really well orchestrated experience that felt well done and I got my problem solved, that's the most important thing, even if they're on the phone in the back room trying to resolve it for you. On the other end of the spectrum, I would say digital is sort of like a customer facing tool. I think you raised a very good point, which is it has to be really intentional. you can wash an entire building in digital screens. I tend to think that the more is not more is often less, and then it just becomes noise to the customer. And this idea that you're going to expect someone, I think we've all proven to ourselves that this idea that you create this giant digital screen that's interactive and you can play with it and touch with it. That people's kids are doing that. The customer themselves is likely not wanting to engage with that as a way of learning and becoming more deeply connected to the brand. I think that happens in this form, and that tool or some version of it is the best way to make that happen.
Agreed. We have just about 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Maybe any closing thoughts before we, or I mean, and we can certainly open it up to questions as well, although I'm blinded by the light, so I can't see anybody. But perhaps maybe some closing thoughts, Vikas, on where you see, this movement. What is most important to you, renovation or reinvention, or are really the two highly integrated?
Yeah, I would say that they're highly integrated. It's hard for me to say that the renovation is like we're only going to do renovations, right? We constantly have to reinvent ourselves, and like right now, we've been rolling out our branches for about 5-6 years now, the newest version of our branch, and we're already starting to think about, okay, what's the next version of it? Because it's going to be a couple of years before you see that version of it.
Exactly.
By the time you get it through drawings, you get it through ideation and the whole process, you're not going to see it for a few years. We've slowly been integrating some new things into the branches, but a lot of the even those changes are sort of behind the scenes, and like you don't see the customer may not see it, or the person who walks in there may not see it, but like to us, it's like it's a big process change on the back end. But yeah, like digital wise, like with the AI coming in, with being able to provide much better recommendations to customers, with knowing what they were doing digitally before they came into the branch, starting to understand those types of things. I think that just that interaction is going to be so much better going forward.
And I guess my curiosity from you is we've talked about some of these same ideas, but are we going to see a Capital One branded hotel at any point in the future, or maybe a private jet?
I will redirect you to our external communication partners. I don't think many brands, many financial services institutions are going to go down the path of Restoration Hardware anytime.
I was going to say, yes, Restoration Hardware. They do have a private jet. Absolutely. That's all part of those brand extensions. No. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate the time. Please feel free to ask these gentlemen as you see them around some questions about their networks, what they're doing, where they're going. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to share their information. And I'm delighted that we can share some of these key ideas with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.